talk more about it. I want to get Ray Didinger's opinion as well on this defense and areas that they can improve. But this is a great time to welcome in for the first time to the Legal Hands to the Face show, Pro Football Hall of Fame reporter, Philadelphia legend, Ray Didinger. Ray, thanks for joining the show, my man. How you doing?
Fine, Bill. How are you doing?
I'm doing great, Ray. We're sitting here 8-1 at the bye. We've won 25 out of 27 games. We are becoming such a spoiled fan base, but I love every second of it.
Yeah, you do get that feeling. It's a lot of people asking me today, what are they going to do with this team? Every game comes right down to the wire, and I said, well, you're 8-1. You're 8-1, and you're pretty much in control of the NFC. I think you're sitting in a pretty good spot right now. And, their performance through half the season has been up and down. I think that's fair to say. But at the end of games, they've made the plays they've had to make to come away with the win. And that's in the NFL today, the way the league is set up now, there are no super teams. There are no perfect Dolphins. There's no steel curtain. There's none of the the mighty Cowboy team, the doomsday defense Cowboys. I mean, there was a time when every so often, in the year, you would have a couple of teams that just were way, way above the pack. And if you weren't one of those teams, you were playing for third place. That's not the NFL today. That's the NFL as we know it. It's a very fluid situation. And even if you're the best team, you're not necessarily the best team by this much. And that's kind of where the Eagles are right now. I mean, they're 8-1, but every game, it seems like, comes right down to the wire. And yesterday was no exception.
You're spot on. And you hear some of these stats, though. I said it before you came on, 25-2 in their last 27 games. I saw John McMullen here on the JAKIB Sports Network give a stat that they've had the best record in the NFL for 27 straight weeks now, I think. But these are things you don't see anymore in the NFL. This is stuff you see at the college level. How impressed are you, though, what Jalen Hurts and Nick Sirianni have been able to do over the last 2.5 seasons now?
Very impressed, because you've got two guys who it wasn't that long ago, everybody wondered if they were up to the task. Certainly the selection of Jalen Hurts when they took him in the draft was very much questioned. A lot of people, what in the world are you drafting a quarterback in the second round when you've already made the commitment you've made to Carson Wentz, and we're not even sure if Jalen Hurts is really going to be an NFL quarterback. We heard that a lot. And, Nick Sirianni was a guy that nobody knew who he was. And here you are now where you've got a coach and a quarterback who do nothing but win. It's pretty remarkable. But, I thought coming into this season, and when I was on JAKIB before the season started, I was on with Derek and Rob Ellis. And I said at that time that I thought that this is the first time that I could ever remember, and I've been covering this team for more than 50 years. I started covering them in 1970. This is the first time going into a season where I honestly could say, I think the Eagles have the best roster in the NFL. I think the Eagles are the best team in the NFL going into the season. I felt that in week one. And here we are midway through the season, and they have the best record, and we'll see if they can sustain it. But I mean, I think we all kind of knew coming into the season that they were really good. And if they could stay reasonably healthy, that they could do some pretty special things. And right now that's where they are. I mean, they're in a really good position in the NFC now. That was a monster big win yesterday, to give the Cowboys the third loss and push them a little bit further down. I mean, right now you got a couple of three loss teams. San Francisco's lost 3, Seattle's lost 3, bad loss yesterday. Cowboys have now lost 3. I mean, the only team that's kind of like right over your shoulder are the Lions with 2. But the Eagles are going into their bye week. They're sitting in a really, really good spot.
Definitely are. But what do you think about that Cowboys team? Because I know we all hate the Cowboys in Philadelphia, but I think they have a pretty good team this year, and I thought they played a pretty good game yesterday.
They did. They did. They are good. They are good. They've got really good players, really a lot of talent on that team. They do things during the course of the game that puzzle me sometimes. I've always had some questions about Mike McCarthy as a coach. There's always been things about the way he runs the team, runs the game that I've always found puzzling. And this year, when he took over, in addition to being the head coach, being his own offensive coordinator, I thought there would be some weeks where you'd just really be scratching your head saying, what are they doing? And yesterday was kind of like that too. I mean, they made a lot of big plays. They moved the ball. I mean, they had about 170 yards in offense just in the fourth quarter, but they kept coming close, but they couldn't get the ball in the end zone. And when they got it down at that last possession, they got it down to the 6-yard line. And next thing you know, they're back at the 30. A couple of bad sacks, a couple of bad calls. They look like a team that's got a lot of talent. They can put up a lot of numbers, but they're not real good at closing out games. If they get ahead early and they get a team on the run, they can bury them like they did with the Rams a week ago. I mean, that was 33-3 at halftime. If they get it rolling, they can embarrass you. They did it to the Giants in week 1. The Giants still haven't recovered. So they have that kind of ability. But if you can hang with them and get them in a close game into the fourth quarter, I always kind of think that the Cowboys, the Eagles are good at finding ways to win. And I think the Cowboys still look like a team that will find a way to lose.
Yeah, it's almost like things snowball one way or the other for the Cowboys. Either they're going to completely dominate a team or things are going to just fall off the rails. But they did stick with it a little bit yesterday. I was surprised when they went down 28-17. I thought it was 100% over. But Cowboys did battle back, and the Eagles got a little bit lucky, especially I talked about it before you came on, that Eagles put the ball on the ground 3 times yesterday. Thankfully, they jumped on all 3. But that last one where Swift ran into A.J. Brown, that could have been a disaster, right?
Yeah. I mean, that was butt fumble 2.0, and I mean that could have cost you the game right there. The Eagles have to stop doing that. I mean, that's the one thing about them that's sort of troubling. You keep thinking for a couple of weeks there, you kind of think, that's just okay. That was this week. They were sloppy this week, but here you are. I mean, you're 8-1, which is good, but you're also minus and giveaway takeaway. That's very unusual. And that kind of thing doesn't generally play well late in the season and in big games. You better not be losing giveaway takeaway late in the season and especially in the postseason, because if you do, you're going home. So that's one of the things. And look, I know the coaches are talking about it. I know they're stressing it. I'm sure it's a point of emphasis every day is take care of the football. And I'm sure they've talked about it, but again, yesterday, it didn't cost them the game, but it could have. I mean, it could have. I mean, the Swift fumble at the end that could have been a killer. It turned out not to be. I mean, the only game you lost, the game up at the Jets, which to me is still hard to fathom, but I mean, you lost that one by turning the ball over. The final interception that Hurst throws, it gets picked off and run back. That cost you the game there. That's just one game, and you've survived it to this point. But you make that kind of a mistake in the playoffs against a good team, that could send you home.
Even with the other 3 turnovers in that Jets game, if they didn't throw that last interception, they probably win that football game, just punting it away.
Oh, sure.
But look, and I want to preface this because sometimes people in the chat get upset that we're being too negative. I am enjoying the fact that they are 8-1. I think this is a very good football team, but there are areas that we need to talk about that they can improve. And one of them is turnovers. Another one is this passing defense. Last year, say what you will about Jonathan Gannon, and I had my problems with Jonathan Gannon, but they had the number 1 passing defense in the entire NFL when the dust settled after that regular season. They are near the bottom of the NFL in passing yards per game right now. What do you think's going on with that secondary?
Changes, different personnel. I mean, pretty much week after week, due to injury or just change, they've been shuffling the deck. And you got a new defensive coordinator. There's just a lot of new people and a lot of moving parts back there. And as a result, I mean, a lot of what you see is communication issues. I mean, guys just not on the same page. Guys not exactly sure where the coverage is going to be. Opposing receivers running wide open. And I think a lot of it, I don't know that it's the fault of the defensive coordinator, but I think it's just a matter of they're still trying to figure it out. They're still trying to figure out. I know the two cornerbacks are back, but the safety position has been in flux all year. The loss of Avonte Maddox before the season started was really a big thing. I mean, I know people don't think of him as a star, quote unquote, but he was very good as your slot defender. And in today's NFL, that guy's important because most teams are going to run a lot of slot formation stuff. And you better have a defender in there that can match up. And Maddox could. And when they lost him, they've been trying to find an answer in there ever since. So that's been one part of it. And you just hope the second half of the year, with a little bit more time to play together, if they don't get any more injuries, the addition of Biard, I think, is going to help. I mean, he's been a guy that's been a very good player over time. A Pro Bowl level player. And I'm a real fan of Sidney Brown. I really am. I thought that I saw him play at Illinois. I thought he was a real good prospect. And when the Eagles got him in the third round, I thought it was a real good pick. And, I think he's going to be a really good player on this team. Now, he's still just trying to get his feet on the ground in the NFL, but he's gotten a lot of experience here the first half of the year, and I think he'll be better for it in the second.
And I said when they drafted him that once he puts it all together on that field, I think he's going to be an immediate fan favorite in this town, the way he throws his body around. And we've already seen some evidence of that. He can hit, man. He's
a very physical player and not the biggest guy, certainly, but fearless and smart, always around the ball. And I really liked him. I mean, at Illinois last year, they had a very good pass defense. They had a really good secondary. I mean, they had Witherspoon at one corner,
who looks really good.
Yeah, and he's people are talking about him as maybe defensive rookie of the year along with Carter. I mean, he's playing that well, and I'm not surprised. He's very good. But when the coaches voted for defensive player of the year in the Big Ten last year, they picked Sidney Brown. They didn't pick Witherspoon. Even though Witherspoon got drafted in the first round and Brown in the third, in terms of game in, game out performance, they graded Brown higher, and so did I. So when the Eagles were able to get him in the third round, I thought that was a steal. And I think the more he plays and the more people get to see him play, the people are going to realize, boy, glad that he came to Philadelphia.
But what do you think about with Sidney Brown? Because as of right now, out of necessity, they have him playing the slot position. Because you mentioned Avonte Maddox got hurt. Another guy who got hurt early, unfortunately, was Zach McPherson, who I thought could have stepped in when Maddox went down, but McPherson got hurt before Maddox even got hurt. Do you think Sidney Brown's playing out of position, or do you think he can handle being that slot player, or does he have to play safety?
I don't think that's his strength. I mean, right now he may be your best option there. But I think he's a natural safety. I think once you're able to put him there and just let him settle in there, then you'll see a really rapid development. Now, that was the original plan, was to draft him because they needed safeties. Frankly, coming into the year, they didn't have any, and so the plan was to give him an opportunity to play back there. Because of the injury situation, have kind of been forced to make him a slot corner. But I don't think that was the original blueprint. And he's giving it his best shot, and look, he's playing okay. If he gets matched up, if a team goes into a formation where they put like a CD Lamb in the slot, well, that's going to be a really tough matchup for Sidney Brown right now. But I think that ultimately his position is going to be at safety, and and if they can, I've tried to work Ricks in there. He's played a little bit in there, and he's looked okay at times, but this is. This is what Sean's trying to figure out. He's trying to figure out who he's got. He knows what he's got with Bradbury. He knows what he's got with Slay. That's okay. He's got that. But the rest of it, from week to week, depending on the opponent, depending on the receivers, depending on the matchups and the scheme, he's going to kind of have to try and reinvent that secondary. And I think that's really the root of the problem. I think it's been a lot of change in a relatively short period of time.
You mentioned he knows what he has in Bradbury and Slay, and there's been some people who are really down on both of those guys. I think they've had some up and down games. I didn't think Bradbury played very well against Dallas on Sunday. I think there's been times where Slay hasn't looked like the Slay of old. Do you think that's just because of the revolving door that we've seen at slot and safety that's affecting those two guys, or do you think maybe they're starting to lose a step?
It could be a little bit of both. I mean, you've got two cornerbacks that are both over 30. And that's not typical. That's a position that in the NFL you can get old quick. And I mean, you talk about the receivers in this league and the passing game in this league and the people you're matched up against. Once you get over 30, that's tough. And to have two 30-year-old corners, that's double tough. Now, they're both very heady players, and they're really smart. And they will play well most of the time. But I mean, you're quite right. I mean, they have had their problems, as has everybody back in the secondary has had their problems. And I'm not saying I'm worried about them, because I think they're smart pros, and from week to week they'll do what they need to do to get ready to play. But when you come out of this bye, you look at that stretch of games that you got coming up and the teams you're going to have to play against. And if the Eagles are going to keep winning, if they're going to keep this thing rolling, your secondary is going to have to play better. And that's going to start with the two corners, because they're your two veterans.
And I mentioned earlier how they had the #1 pass defense last year. A lot of what helped them there was how good the defensive line was, setting a record for the most sacks in the regular season for the Philadelphia Eagles. What do you think about the D-line so far this season? They obviously lost Javon Hargrave. They replaced him with Baby Rhino, Jalen Carter. What do you think about the D-line this season?
It's really good. It's very good. I mean, you see they've been very hard to run against, #1 run defense in the league. And they get a lot of pressure on the quarterback. It certainly got a lot of pressure in situations where they needed it. I think that's one of the things that you see with this Eagles team to this point, is late in games when the other team's trying to drive the ball on the last possession or two. The pass rush really steps up and has shown an ability to close games out. We saw Reddick do it a couple of times, get late sacks, put games away. And yesterday, the sack by Josh Sweat was a huge sack. I mean, really, really put that Cowboy offense in reverse. And then Brandon Graham, the old pro, I mean, he's not getting a whole lot of snaps these days, but he's enough of a veteran that he understands in that situation what needs to be done. And, the Cowboy was having a tough day yesterday. And Brandon saw it, knew exactly what to do, set him up, goes to the outside, cuts to the inside, clear path to Dak Prescott. He gets a sack too. It's really great to have a guy like Graham, who's as smart as he is and as instinctive as he is, to have him as sort of a fourth quarter wild card, to have him fresh come in the fourth quarter, because he has an ability to, when you're close to closing a game out, he can kind of smell it. And, and if you need a big sack, even at this point in his career, he'll get it. And he got a couple of them yesterday.
And had a real nice play on that 2-point conversion where Dak steps out of bounds. But if you look, BG's hustling, man, trying to get to that corner to not make it easy on Dak, puts a little pressure on him. Dak steps out of bounds. So BG can always step up in a big moment. Obviously none bigger than Super Bowl 52, but yep. BG is going to go down as one of the best to ever do it in this town. That's for sure.
Yeah, he's played more games than any defensive lineman in the history of the franchise. And the Eagles go back to 1933. And they've had a lot of really good defensive linemen come through here. And at this point, Brandon Graham has played more games than any of them. And he's really, he's the definition of a pro. He's really the definition of a pro. I mean, he really, for a guy that got off to a tough start in this town, a lot of questions being asked, why did they draft this guy? And then, he gets an early injury and he's missing time. And I mean, people are calling him a bust. I mean,
I
it's hard to
remember that.
remember.
Yeah.
It's hard to remember. It's hard to remember now because you're going back more than 10 years. But I mean, year 2, year 3, people are starting to call him a bust. And here he is now as a guy with no question he's going to be in the Eagles Hall of Fame. And at this point, he's already played more games on the defensive line than anybody in the history of the franchise. So I think that speaks well for the kind of player that he is.
And if he gets 2 more games, BG stays healthy for 2 more games, he will have the most games played in franchise history of any player. Right now, he's 1 game behind David Akers. So he needs 1 more to tie Akers and then 2 more to have the most games played in franchise history. And it's crazy because you got right behind him, Kelce is probably going to break the record this year too, as well as Fletcher Cox. All 3 of those guys will finish 1, 2, and 3 in franchise history for most games played after this season.
Yeah, it is pretty amazing. And when you're talking about, Fletcher and Brandon are both first-round picks. But Kelce might even be more amazing than either of them because he came in as a 6th-round pick. He walked into training camp. Nobody knew who he was. Says, who's this guy? And
everybody knows him now, Ray. Everybody.
He came in that first year and beat out a pretty good player in Jamal Jackson. Howard Mudd, the offensive line coach, liked Jason right away. I immediately saw that he was exactly what he wanted at the center position, and he stepped in and he's never left. And he's going to go down as one of the all-time, not just one of the all-time best players in the history of the franchise, but one of the all-time great personalities in the history of the franchise.
I know his podcast now is more famous than ever because of all this Taylor Swift mess. I'm so sick of hearing about all that stuff, but it's great. It's great for the NFL. It's bringing in a lot of new fans, that's for sure.
It really is. It really is. I mean, people don't understand that part of it, but I mean, if you look at the ratings, there are people that aren't football fans that are watching now, tuning in on weekends to watch Kansas City games to see if Taylor Swift is there. It's and the NFL loves it. The more people they can bring into the tent, the better.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see Monday night coming out of the bye what happens if she's going to be in Kansas City for that game against the Eagles, because I believe she was an Eagles fan before all this happened.
She was, of sorts. I don't know that she was a big Eagles fan. The first time I ever saw Taylor Swift, she was a high school kid who came to the Wells Fargo Center to sing the national anthem for a Sixers game. She came down and sang the anthem at a Sixers game, and she was 11th grader, 12th grader. Nobody knew who she was, but I was there that night. I thought, wow, she's really good. Well, turns out that's Taylor Swift. Now, I don't know how much of a football fan she was, or even a basketball fan.
Yeah.
But this was certainly her quote unquote home team. But now, I think everybody knows where her allegiances are. They're with the world champions.
Man, I didn't realize she sang the national anthem for the Sixers. That's pretty cool.
Yeah,
that is pretty cool. So, you mentioned earlier you've been doing this for 50 years. So you have seen the NFL really change over the years. And in this town, a lot of people remember those Buddy Ryan defenses, and all they want to talk about is, and I see my uncle's actually in the chat, we need to blitz more. We need to blitz more. So I want to get Ray Didinger's thoughts, because obviously the NFL has changed. But in this game against the Dallas Cowboys, Eagles only blitzed 13% of the time. Dak Prescott dropped back 53 times. Eagles only blitzed him 7 of those 53 times. But what do you think? So far this year, I'll give you the rate here. They're blitzing about 24% of the time before that Dallas game. Puts them middle of the pack of the league.
I was going to say that's about average.
Yeah, teams just don't blitz a lot. There's a few who do. I think Wink Martindale at the Giants blitzes a ton. The Tampa Bay Bucks D coordinator blitzes a ton. But what do you think? Are you more in the school of thought that the NFL has evolved and changed, that blitzing is more of a thing of the past?
It changed a lot. I think the issue is, and yes, it's everything about that. Well, it's not just football, but all sports. There's a constant evolution, and the game never stays the same. And it kind of goes in circles and it goes in cycles. And something that was new once time gets old, and then it winds up coming new again. The wheel just keeps going around. But right now we're in a cycle where everything everything on offense right now is spread the field and get the ball out of the quarterback's hands fast. I mean, the only thing whenever you talk to offense, whenever you hear head coaches or offensive coordinators talk, the thing that they stress, regardless of who the quarterback is, the thing that they always stress is ball's coming out fast. You got to get the ball out fast. I mean, 2.1 seconds, 2.2 seconds. So if you blitz, even if you blitz, it's hard to get to a quarterback if he's getting the ball off in 2 seconds. And if you commit extra guys to the blitz, now you're thin on the back end. And if that ball's coming out, there's fewer defenders there to play it. So I know there's in Philadelphia especially, people just hold on to the memory of that Buddy Ryan defense and the 46 and, going after the quarterback on every play, which, hey, listen, that was fun. It was fun. It wasn't fun for the quarterbacks, but it was fun football to watch. But now, I mean, you can't do that. I mean, you couldn't, and I don't think Buddy would even want, well, maybe Buddy would. I was going to say, even Buddy wouldn't be blitzing on every down, but knowing Buddy, maybe he would. But the fact is, it just can't be as effective because the offenses have changed to the point where that ball's coming out so fast and you got max protect. I think what teams have to do is, I think they have, to me, you need better coordination between the front seven and the back of your defense. If you're going to rush the passer, you can't have your secondary playing off. You can't have your secondary playing real soft on defense. You can't go total zone back there, because if that ball's coming out fast, you can't give him that quick release pass. You can't give him that quick look pass. You got to make him hold that ball, pat that ball, and give your rush a chance to get home. I think the Eagles pass rush, they have enough good pass rushers that they don't have to blitz a lot. I mean, their defensive line men are good enough that they can generate a pass rush. But I think sometimes you have to tighten up the coverage in the secondary to give that rush a chance to get home.
Yeah, that was so frustrating against the Washington Commanders 2 weeks ago. Was it became clear right away they were trying to get rid of the ball quickly. They wanted the ball out of Howe's hands quickly, but the corners were still 8 to 10 yards off the ball. Right. I did think in this Dallas game that the corners were playing at times closer to the line of scrimmage, but they let CeeDee Lamb just dominate them from the slot. And that was a little bit concerning, but he's a good player, definitely a good player, but I felt like maybe they should have done some different things to try to slow him down a little bit.
They tried, but I mean, he's really good. And he and Dak right now really have a real good feel for each other. I mean, you saw it the last 2 or 3 games. I mean, they killed the Rams and they lit up the Eagles yesterday. I mean, right now the two of them have a really good feel for what they want to do. And Lamb is he's just really good. I mean, he's very good at running routes. And even if you try to double him, even if you try to bracket him, he's really good at finding the holes in the secondary. And he has a really devastating double move, which he threw at the Eagles a couple times yesterday and got big plays on it. Yeah, I mean, everybody goes into the game and you know who he is and you know where he is, and your game plan is obviously to try and limit him and what he can do. But it's really hard. I mean, he's one of those guys, a little bit like A.J. Brown. I mean, there's a handful of those receivers in the league that, I mean, everybody spends all week trying to figure out ways to defend them and ways to slow them down. And they're so good that it's just hard to do.
You mentioned A.J. Brown. I need your opinion on this, Ray. Best wide receiver the Philadelphia Eagles have ever had?
Not ready to say that yet. I mean, you got a couple. You got a couple that are in the Hall of Fame, and you still got to give them their due. Pete Pijos in the 50s, Tommy McDonald in the 60s, Harold Carmichael 70s and 80s. I mean, they're all got busts and Canton, so they're pretty special players. But AJ, he's right now. I think he's the best receiver in football right now. I mean, if I was, there's nobody in the no receiver in the league, in my view, that I would rather be throwing the ball to than him. Now I know Justin Jefferson's out right now with an injury, but even if Jefferson were playing, I really like Jefferson. I think he's an outstanding player. But honestly, I mean, Brown to me is a more physically dominant player, and I think he's the best receiver in the NFL right now. But the best receiver in Eagles history, I'm not quite ready to go quite there yet. But listen, he's, as far as in the NFL at this very moment, yeah, I would put him number one.
Yeah, he's doing some impressive things, but you're right. It's everybody knows the Eagles are going to try to get him the ball, but yet he always is open. That's what he says, right? He's always open. But let me ask you,
and he is, and he's so strong, and he's got really good hands. You don't see him drop a pass. I mean, he's got really, really good hands, and the pairing of he and Smith is really good. I mean, it's, as I said, I think Brown is the best receiver in the league. But I think Brown and Smith together are the best pair of receivers in the league, and they are they're a headache for defensive coordinators. Now, the Eagles took a blow now with the loss of Dallas Goedert. I mean, when you had Goddard in there as your tight end, then you really had three significant weapons in terms of getting downfield. Losing Goddard is going to hurt you. I mean, those two other guys are still going to get their numbers, but the Eagles are going to miss Dallas Goedert.
What I'm really concerned about with them losing Dallas Goedert is something I wanted to talk to you about, is their running game, because Goddard is such a good run blocker and makes it difficult on these defenses because he also has the ability to catch the ball. But it's like having another offensive lineman on the field with how good he run blocks. But this running game, even with Dallas Goedert, has struggled over the last few weeks. And I've looked at the numbers. Really, after that Tampa Bay Bucks game, where they had two really good rushing games in a row, Minnesota and Tampa Bay, they haven't really done a great job running the football. The average yards per carry for the running backs went 3.9, 3.6, 2.3, 3.4, 2.9, down to 3.1 again yesterday. What do you think's going on why this team can't run the football as effectively as last year? And before you answer, prime example, end of the game yesterday. Eagles get the ball back with 6 minutes. Last year's offense would have probably gone on a 4 or 5 minute drive, pounding the football, never even given the Dallas Cowboys a chance to get it back. Eagles go 3 and out. They then get the ball back with 1:17 left. Go 3 and out again because they haven't been able to effectively run the football. What do you think's going on?
I think they've gotten away from it too readily. I think it's a little bit of the old Andy trap that you start the game, you try to run it a series or 2 series, you're not very successful, and then they just say, "Oh, the heck with it," and they start throwing it. And I think to be a good running team, you have to run the ball. You have to really commit to it. And I'm not suggesting you run it 50 times. I mean, nobody does that in today's NFL. But, I mean, you know how good this offensive line is. I mean, they really are. And I think some people have suggested that, when Cam Jurgens went out and they've had moved a Peta in there for a couple of games, the performance of the offensive line suffered a little bit. Well, I think that's probably true. But I don't think that's the sole reason you're having trouble running the ball. They just never seem to be able to sustain, for the lack of a better term, a rhythm in a running game. They run it once and get away from it, then run it another time, maybe 2 times, and get away from it. And I think you just kind of need to stay with it and really allow the offensive line to get that flow going and getting the backs timed up and just getting the rhythm in the running game. I just don't think that the play calling has lent itself to that. I really thought you'd see more of it yesterday, because the Cowboys had the 2 games that they had lost prior to that. The teams beat them basically by running the football. I mean, Arizona ran for 220 yards on them. That was how Arizona beat them. And San Francisco ran for, I think, like 175, and that was how they beat them. So that seemed to be the formula for beating the Cowboys, was to run the ball. And I thought, okay, this to me looks like a game where the Eagles are going to come out and, run it more. And yeah, they did a little bit. I mean, but you didn't really see them dominate the game on the ground. They certainly didn't dominate the game on the ground. It'll be interesting to see coming out of the bye, when you're going into a stretch of playing really good teams, certainly better teams than what you've played to this point. What the offensive approach is, and if they start to run the ball, if they have some more success, because we know we're getting into that November, December part of the season, where the weather's going to get a little nastier, and the competition's going to get a little tougher, and running the football is going to be a big part of your offense, because some weeks it's just going to be hard to throw it. And I think the Eagles need to kind of work on that and generate a little bit more of that to be the best team that they can be when they get into December, January.
All right, 2 last questions for you, Ray, before I let you out the door here. We're about halfway through the season, actually exactly halfway through the season here. What grade would you give the 2 new coordinators, Brian Johnson and Sean Desai, through 9 games?
You're 8-1. So, you got to give them. They've got the best record in the league, so you got to give them a pretty good grade. I would say B+ on both of them. I could probably tell you, I could probably point out this thing or that thing that I might have done differently. Questions I had, things that had me scratching my head, but it's not that much. They've in big situations in games. In the second half of games, when they had to make plays on both sides of the ball, I thought that they showed the ability to do that. And I think that, I really didn't know that much about either one of them, because neither one of them really had a track record as a coordinator. So it isn't like, okay, I know exactly what this guy's philosophy is. I know exactly what his approach is going to be. So I know what to expect. I didn't really know what to expect with either of them. And at this point, I got to say, I think they've done a really good job. It's been a tough job for Desai, because he's had so much how many new players he's had to cycle through there. A little less so on the other side with Johnson. But I think both of them, if I were to grade them, I'd say I'd give them both a solid B+.
I think that's a pretty fair assessment, right? Well, Ray, I really appreciate you joining us, man. First time we've ever had Ray Didinger on the Legal Hands of the Face show. An absolute legend. So I appreciate you making the time, and I know our fans in the chat did as well. So thank you, Ray. Hopefully we'll see you again soon, brother.
Always a pleasure, Bill. Take care and have enjoy your bye week.
Exactly. Have a good night.
Take care. You too.
Oh, man, Ray Didinger, an absolute legend. I could listen to him talk football all night long. So he gave us a lot of time here. Said some good stuff, and I agree with him. Rating these coordinators as B+. If you guys follow the Philly Sports Power Hour, I said it today. Look, I know we were angry about some of the things that happened in that Dallas game, especially in that secondary. But when do we start putting some blame on the players? We always want to blame the coaches. Eagles give up a lot of passing yards. It's the coach's fault. It's the defensive coordinator's fault. Well, sometimes the players need to take responsibility as well for not executing on the field. So I do think that Desai and Brian Johnson are doing a pretty decent job. I've questioned some play calls from Brian Johnson, but I think he's gotten better. And we saw some creativity yesterday in the red zone. I thought that they were very creative in the red zone, go 3 for 3. Also liked when they came out in that 2-back set, lined up DeAndre Swift in the slot, had him come in motion, had Kenny Gainwell lead blocking for him on that play. That was a nice designed play. So I think they're getting better. I think we're doing pretty good. But, guys, when we come back, we're going to take a quick break. And when we come back, we're going to be joined by Dr. Chris Radcliffe. I want to talk to him about this Dallas Goedert injury, what the reports are there, Jalen Hurts' knee, how Jalen Hurts was able to bounce back and come out in that second half, because that did not look good. And we'll see what Dr. Radcliffe thinks about Cam Jurgens and his ability to hopefully come back after the bye. So stay tuned, guys. We'll be right back.